let's start first up with Matt Araiza and what is going on and what the league must be thinking about it. And they don't have any jurisdiction to place him under the personal conduct policy because this happened before he was a pro. Is that the case, Mike?
Anything that happens before guys drafted or signs an undrafted free agent contract is off limits. Now, if he would get in any sort of off-field trouble in the future under the personal conduct policy, penalties could be expedited or enhanced or both because of the past incident. Whatever the facts may be, it becomes relevant to the examination then. But if he never gets in any issues, it's never something that factors into what the league could do. But realistically, you take a step back. This isn't Deshaun Watson. This isn't a quarterback. This is a punter. Now, I don't know what the Bills knew back in April. There have been reports that they didn't know about this. They became aware of it at some point since then. What would they have done differently if they had known about this? Would they have used a sixth-round pick if they had known about these allegations? What have they learned if, presumably, they've investigated it? And what will they do moving forward? They could cut him if they wanted to. Now, the union could file a grievance, and they may have to pay him his salary. But if you believe, based upon the investigation that you perform, the league has resources, the Bills have resources, if they come to the conclusion that they think this guy may be responsible for what he did, he's a punter. You find a different punter. And I know punters are people too, but that is the most interchangeable position on a football team other than long snapper and holder. And do the Bills want to carry this cloud into their season? Does the NFL want Matt Araiza punting on NBC in 13 days when the Bills and the Rams play to start the season? I don't think it's something the NFL would want, and I presume that they would put him on paid leave if he fell within that specific portion of the personal conduct policy, but he doesn't because it happened before he got drafted.
Is there such a thing for a team paid leave where the team has like their own exempt list in the way that the commissioner would have?
That power went away in the 2006 CBA after what the Eagles did to Terrell Owens, and before that the Buccaneers did it to Keyshawn Johnson, where they basically sent him home with pay. But if the guy agrees to it, like last year, Deshaun Watson, happy to get paid to not play for the Texans. Maybe Jimmy Garoppolo this year, happy to get paid to not play for the 49ers. If the Bills would go to him and say, look, here's what we're going to do. We're going to deactivate you every week. You're still on the 53-man roster. You're still part of the team, but we're going to have a different punter, and you're just not going to suit up and you're not going to play while this goes forward. And if he's okay with it, it's not a problem. It's only a problem if he says, no, I insist on my right to be on the roster and I don't agree to go along with this. And if that's the case, then it gets more complicated. But they could do it. And we've seen it. As long as the player's okay with it, the team could do it.
And then, I just learned about this yesterday, as most of us did, right? So from what I have read, it appears that the detectives in this case, who actually were on what I read as a pretext call with the victim, the alleged victim, and Araiza, before we get to where the detectives are with this case, and I ask you about that, what is a pretext call? Because that is the most damning portion of the civil lawsuit that I read yesterday.
Well, that is, and I did not handle criminal defense work when I practiced law, but it appears to be a device that allows detectives to listen in to conversations that potentially would be incriminating, and it sounds like there were some incriminating things said there as it relates to whether or not there were sexual relations between Araiza and the 17-year-old girl. His lawyer did a TV interview last night, and he basically admitted that something happened. The position is there was nothing forcible, that he didn't know she was under 18, which introduces a completely different set of problems because in California you have to be 18 years of age, and there are some exceptions, and one of them would be that he's young enough that he just really didn't know and she misrepresented her age, et cetera. So there are various potential avenues for criminal liability, and it sounds like on this call he said some things that complicate his situation and things that could lead the Bills to become sufficiently concerned that they would take some sort of action about it.
And then, according to the LA Times, the detectives just recently delivered their findings to authorities about whether now placing it in front of people whose decision it is to charge or not. So my question for you is, based on whatever knowledge you may have on similar circumstances, how long do you think does that take usually? Because I'm wondering if a team paid leave that Araiza would accept as opposed to being cut is a workable, for the moment, response. Do you think?
We fall back to the same situation we were in with Deshaun Watson, where a grand jury potentially could be presented with the evidence. Would the prosecutor be motivated to get an indictment, understanding that eventually you have to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt? How aggressively would the prosecutor push for an indictment? Is there a mechanism for charging without a grand jury? So it all comes down to, ultimately, does a prosecutor believe that he or she can prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt? Prosecutors don't like to take on cases that they think they may lose, and they have incredible power and discretion. They're the most powerful individuals in any local justice system, more so than the judges, because the judges are limited by what's put on their docket. The prosecutors are the ones who decide what gets put on the docket and what doesn't. So that subjective assessment of the case, the belief in whether or not they can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, that goes a long way toward determining whether or not charges are going to be filed here. And it obviously reaches a very different level if he would be indicted for some sort of felony crime under California law. At that point, he may not want to be on the Buffalo Bills. He may want to focus all of his time and efforts on preparing his defense, exonerating his name, and then, if he's able to, and then continuing his career at some point in the future.